They say your bedroom should be the safest place in your house. But what if I told you the way you sleep tonight could quietly shape how you wake up tomorrow, or whether you wake up at all? I'm sharing this not as a doctor or some expert in a white coat, but as a man in his 70s who's seen one too many close calls among friends and patients over the years. And one night, it nearly happened to me too. It was just before Christmas, during one of those cold Michigan winters when the wind bites and the nights stretch long. I had gone to bed feeling fine, no pain, no symptoms, nothing out of the ordinary. My wife Janet had already turned in early. The house was quiet, peaceful. I remember lying on my back, no pillow, thinking it might help my sore neck. I had read somewhere that keeping the spine flat was good for posture. I thought I was doing something healthy. But in the middle of the night, something felt off. I woke up gasping for air, chest tight, dizzy. My vision spun. I tried calling Janet, but the words slurred out of my mouth. I couldn't lift my arm. I couldn't move my leg. That was the first time I really understood how fragile our brain is. One wrong position, one minor restriction in blood flow, one silent pressure on a vessel, and everything changes. The doctors later told me it was a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. It resolved within hours, thankfully. But they were clear. It was triggered by a combination of low oxygen intake and restricted circulation from my sleeping position. I had unknowingly laid my head at the exact height of my heart. For someone in their 20s, that might not be a big deal. But at my age, the blood vessels are not as forgiving. Laying flat without support can reduce cranial blood flow just enough to tip the balance. It made me realize how many of us are putting our brains at risk every single night, without even knowing it. And here's the part that really gets me. That night wasn't unique. After I recovered, I started looking around. My neighbor George, a retired firefighter, had a similar episode 2 years earlier also while sleeping. My sister-in-law, Emily, who lives down in Florida, had a stroke in her sleep just 6 months before mine. None of us saw it coming. None of us thought our bed could be a battlefield. So if you're over 50, or you have a loved one who is, I need you to hear this. The position you sleep in matters more than you think, especially if you're already dealing with high blood pressure, diabetes, or even mild sleep apnea. The solution is simpler than you might expect. A gentle incline of the head. Not a huge wedge or expensive device, just raising your pillow slightly or adjusting your bed so your head is a few inches above your heart. It helps your blood flow toward your brain during the hours when it matters most. It gives your body the support it needs while your mind rests. Tonight, before you sleep, I invite you to pay attention to your pillow, your position, your breath. That small shift might just be the difference between a good night's rest and a very different morning. And before I close this chapter, here's a thought that stayed with me. We often focus so much on what we do when we're awake. Our diets, our exercise, our medications. But what if the biggest key to longevity is hidden in how we sleep? What if our body isn't just resting but recovering, repairing, and protecting us if we only give it the right chance? Let's not wait until something goes wrong. Let's not assume silence means safety. Let's make our bed a place of healing, not risk. Because growing older doesn't mean growing vulnerable. It means growing wiser. And tomorrow, I'll tell you about what happened to George. That story changed everything for him, and it might just change everything for you too. George lived just 2 houses down from mine, in a modest red brick home he'd kept spotless since his wife passed 5 years ago. He's the kind of man who still washes his truck every Saturday and knows the name of every dog in the neighborhood. To most people, George looked like the picture of a sturdy, retired American man. One morning, a few months before my own incident, George didn't come out for his usual walk. That was strange. He never missed it, rain or shine. Around noon, his daughter showed up, panicked. She hadn't heard from him. I watched as the paramedics rolled up, their quiet urgency louder than sirens. George had suffered a stroke sometime around 4 in the morning. He'd gone to bed like always, lying flat on his back, arms folded gently over his stomach, no pillow. That was his habit for over 20 years. He said it helped his back. But that night, something in his brain just shut down. They found him lying still, one side of his face slack, unable to speak. He survived, but his voice changed. His right hand never fully recovered. George, the man who once built shelves with his bare hands, now struggled to button a shirt. When I visited him weeks later, sitting in the sunny corner of his living room where we used to share cold beers after mowing the lawn, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. I went to bed strong. I woke up. Half of me was gone. That hit me like a truck. And when I had my own scare, his words came back like thunder. The doctors had told George that his sleeping position likely contributed to the stroke. Lying completely flat for prolonged hours can reduce cerebral perfusion, especially in older adults. Blood doesn't circulate like it used to. Veins don't bounce back like rubber hoses anymore. They stiffen, they narrow, they clot. And when your brain doesn't get enough oxygen-rich blood while you sleep, it doesn't take much for damage to occur. George's case wasn't a freak accident. It was part of a pattern we don't talk about enough. The silent danger of how we sleep. So I started asking questions. I talked to a sleep specialist in Detroit, Dr. Leanne Mitchell, a woman with sharp eyes and a softer voice. She told me she'd seen this over and over again. Patients over 60 coming in after unexplained mini-strokes, always during the night, always when laying flat. She said the body's blood pressure naturally drops during deep sleep, and for older adults, that drop can be enough to starve the brain of oxygen, especially when the head isn't elevated. Her words haunted me. But what she said next gave me hope. It's not about sleeping, sitting up, or buying a $1,000 device, she told me. It's about simple elevation. A head raised just 6 inches can make all the difference. I went home that day and changed my setup. George, after his stroke, started using an adjustable bed his daughter bought for him. His speech is slow, but his message is clear. If I knew this earlier, he said one day as we sat on his porch, I'd still be building birdhouses, not dropping spoons. There's something deeply American about thinking we can tough it out. That pain is weakness. That sleep is simple. That age is just a number. But George's story reminds us that wisdom isn't about enduring silently, it's about adapting smartly. So if you've been sleeping flat on your back without a pillow, like George did for 2 decades, maybe tonight's the night you make a small shift. Stack that second pillow. Adjust the recliner. Give your brain a better shot at thriving while you rest. Because what happened to George wasn't bad luck. It was a warning sign most of us never hear until it's too late. And as George and I both learned the hard way, your bedroom might be your favorite place. But if you're not sleeping smart, it can become the most dangerous room in your house. Next, I want to tell you about a woman named Susan. Her story is different, but the outcome nearly mirrored ours. And it all started with something we've all done without a second thought. Susan was one of those women who lit up every room she walked into. She wore red lipstick without apology, drove a vintage teal convertible, and made the best peach cobbler in all of Georgia. I met her at a wellness retreat in Asheville a few years back, and we kept in touch ever since. She called me one morning not to catch up, but because she was scared. I woke up on the floor, she said. No clue how I got there. That sentence alone sent chills down my spine. She lived alone in Savannah, in one of those charming old colonial homes with creaky wooden floors and a canopy bed straight out of a southern fairy tale. That night, it had been especially humid. Susan, being Susan, had turned on the ceiling fan, cracked open a window, and curled up under her favorite quilt, one she'd sewn with her mother decades ago. But here's what mattered most. She had fallen asleep curled in a fetal position, with her head tucked sharply downward, chin to chest, no neck support. I like feeling cocooned, she told me. It makes me feel safe. Safe. That word echoed in my mind. We often mistake comfort for safety. But in Susan's case, that cocoon was more like a trap. She didn't remember the fall, just waking up at 3 in the morning, sprawled beside her bed, disoriented, nauseous, unable to feel her right arm. The ambulance took her in. The scans showed a transient blockage in the vertebral artery, the major blood vessel running along the back of the neck. What caused it? Prolonged flexion of the neck during sleep. That tucked-in position, especially when held for hours without movement, can restrict blood flow to the brainstem. In younger folks, the body compensates. In our age group, the risk rises sharply. Susan had unknowingly pinched off one of the main highways feeding her brain. Doctors called it a vertebrobasilar insufficiency, a fancy way of saying her brainstem wasn't getting enough blood. It's the same area that controls balance, coordination, and the muscles of speech. That's why she had slurred words. That's why she fell. That's why she lost time. When she told me what happened, I went quiet, because I realized how many times I'd fallen asleep on a plane, a recliner, even a church pew, head dangling forward, thinking nothing of it. Her neurologist had explained it gently. When your head is bent downward for too long, especially at night, gravity and anatomy work against you. The vertebral arteries, already narrower with age, can become compressed between bones and soft tissue. The brainstem, unlike the rest of the brain, has very little tolerance for reduced flow. Minutes matter. Susan recovered, mostly. Her speech returned within days, but her confidence took longer. "I used to love sleeping curled up," she said. "Now, I'm afraid of it." But here's the part I admire most about her. She didn't let that fear paralyze her. Instead, she got curious. She researched sleeping positions. She bought a neck-stabilizing pillow. She started yoga to gently strengthen her neck muscles. She even held a sleep safety workshop at her church, teaching others, especially the women in her age group, how to protect their brain while they sleep. And you know what? Her quilt's still on her bed. But now, her head rests high, her spine aligned, her sleep deeper than ever. Susan taught me something important. That danger doesn't always come from the loud things: car crashes, falls, heart attacks. Sometimes, it whispers from the quiet corners of our daily lives. The way we tuck ourselves in, the positions we choose without thought, the habits we mistake for harmless. If you're someone who curls up at night, who feels safest when folded into yourself, I get it. But tonight, try adjusting just a little. A neck roll under your pillow, a softer incline. Let your spine breathe. Let your brain have space to rest, not struggle. Because, as Susan learned, comfort should never come at the cost of consciousness. Tomorrow, I want to tell you about a habit that nearly cost me my life. And I'd bet my favorite mug you've done it too, especially on colder nights. That night, the wind was howling something fierce. The kind of cold that finds its way through every window frame no matter how much you've sealed them. It was February in Vermont, and the snow outside had buried my porch railings completely. I remember it vividly because I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I pulled the blanket up over my head. It was a thick wool quilt my daughter had made me last Christmas. Heavy, warm, comforting. I thought I'd just stay like that until the room warmed up a bit, then I'd slide it back down. But I didn't. I drifted off, cocooned in that warmth, breathing in the same air I was breathing out. And that, my friend, is where things went sideways. I woke up hours later with a pounding headache. My heart was racing. My mouth was dry as cotton. And for a moment, I couldn't remember what day it was. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked in the mirror. I was pale. Not just tired, truly drained. At first, I brushed it off. I figured maybe the heat was too high, or I was dehydrated. But something about it lingered. The fatigue didn't lift. The headache came back that afternoon. It wasn't until I told my son, who happens to be a paramedic, that things became clearer. "You basically starved your brain of oxygen all night," he said. "Covering your head like that traps carbon dioxide. You were breathing stale air for hours." He explained it in terms even I couldn't argue with. At our age, oxygen is already harder for our bodies to circulate efficiently. Add to that a closed-off space with limited airflow, and the brain starts to suffocate quietly, invisibly. It made sense. I remembered the foggy-headed feeling, the weakness in my arms, the way I struggled to find the right words in a conversation that morning. And then I thought about Clara. Clara was a friend of my late wife. Lived alone in Maine, loved her morning crossword puzzles and hot tea with honey. She passed away in her sleep 2 winters ago. Peacefully, they said. But her daughter later told me she was found completely buried under the blankets. That detail never left me. We don't talk enough about this. The silent suffocation that can happen when we think we're keeping warm. Older adults, especially those with slower respiratory function, sleep apnea, or cardiovascular issues, are at real risk. We grew up thinking a warm bed was the safest place in the world, and it is until we make it airtight. I've since made changes. I keep the room a little warmer now, yes, but more importantly, I keep my face and head exposed. I use layered blankets instead of one heavy quilt. I even invested in a quiet space heater for those biting cold nights. But most of all, I learned this. Comfort should never come at the cost of breath. Our breath is life. Oxygen is not just fuel, it's the difference between waking up clear-minded and slipping away without notice. If you've ever pulled the blanket over your head, especially on nights when the wind feels cruel and the air sharp, I get it. That instinct for warmth is deep. But I ask you, before you sleep tonight, take one small step back. Leave a window for air. Let your lungs work without struggle. Give your brain the oxygen it deserves. Because sometimes, the coziest habits are the most dangerous. And it's only when we wake up from the fog that we realize how close we came to not waking up at all. Tomorrow, I want to take you into the living room. That recliner you love? The one that hugs your back just right? It may be setting you up for a risk you never saw coming. I still remember the day I bought that recliner. It was on sale at a furniture store just outside of Pittsburgh. Soft leather, deep cushions, and the kind of back support that makes you sigh the moment you sit down. I called it my throne, and like most men my age, I fell asleep in it more times than I can count. At first, it was harmless. A Sunday football nap, a short doze after mowing the lawn. But gradually, that chair became my default sleeping spot. It cradled me just right, especially when my arthritis flared up. My bedroom felt too far, my bed too flat. The recliner? Always there, always welcoming, until the night it betrayed me. I had fallen asleep watching an old Western, legs elevated, head slumped slightly to the side, arms resting on the plush armrests. Nothing unusual. But that morning, something was off. My left foot tingled. I tried to stand and stumbled. My leg felt heavy, almost foreign. I waited it out, assuming it was just from being still too long. But by noon, I was dragging my foot slightly when I walked. My balance was off. My speech? Slurred. It took a trip to the ER and an MRI to confirm it. I'd had a small stroke, not in my sleep, but because of it. The doctors explained that my position in the recliner had caused blood to pool in my lower limbs. That's common when the legs are elevated for long periods without movement, especially in older adults. What shocked me more was what they found: a small clot that had likely formed during the night, dislodged when I stood, and traveled upward. A perfect storm. Comfort, stillness, gravity, and age. I thought back to Harold, a neighbor from my days in Ohio. He swore by his recliner, slept in it every night for over a decade. He said his bed hurt his back. But Harold had 2 strokes in his 70s, both while sleeping upright, both unexplained. Looking back, I wonder now if his beloved chair had something to do with it. We don't like to admit that the things that comfort us might also harm us. It feels disloyal almost, like turning on an old friend. But here's the truth no one told us growing up. Circulation isn't something you feel until you don't T. And sleep isn't just about rest, it's about flow. When you sleep in a reclined position, especially for hours, your blood can slow, pool, or worse, clot. Combine that with dehydration, thickened blood from age or medication, and suddenly, that cozy chair becomes a quiet threat. I still keep that recliner. I didn't throw it out, but I use it differently now. I make sure to get up every hour. I stretch, I walk, and when it's time for true sleep, I go to bed where my body can fully stretch, align, and breathe. I've also started wearing compression socks during the day and drinking a glass of water before I sleep. Small things, but they add up. If you or someone you love sleeps in a chair most nights, especially one that props the legs up for long periods, take this as a gentle nudge. You don't have to give it up. Just change how you use it. Let it be your rest stop, not your destination. Because that recliner, as comforting as it may be, doesn't love you back. Not the way your brain, your heart, your future do. Next time, I'll share a story that shook me to my core. It's about a man who slept on his side like so many of us do, but woke up unable to lift his arm. And the cause? Not what you'd expect. His name was Daniel. He was a retired carpenter from Boise, strong as an ox even at 68. The kind of man who still split his own firewood and could fix a leaky faucet faster than most 20-year-olds. We met at a community center health talk where I was sharing my experience. He came up afterward, shook my hand with a grip like iron, and said, "You ever sleep so good you wake up broken?" I laughed, but then I saw his face. He wasn't joking. Daniel told me that one morning, a few months back, he woke up on his side, just like always. Right arm tucked under his head, shoulder pulled forward, hand curled close to his chest. He'd slept like that for decades. It was his comfort position. Familiar, reliable. Only that morning, his arm didn't move. Not just tingling, not just to sleep. It was limp. Dead weight. He tried shaking it out, thinking it was just temporary. But as minutes passed, he realized something was wrong. His fingers wouldn't respond. His grip was gone. His bicep refused to engage. By the time he got to the clinic, sensation had returned partially, but the strength hadn't, and it didn't for weeks. The diagnosis? Compression neuropathy, a fancy way of saying he'd pressed on the nerves and blood vessels under his armpit for too long. The brachial plexus, a complex network that controls arm movement, had been quietly squeezed all night. Not cut off completely, but just enough to starve the nerves of oxygen. His doctor called it a Saturday night palsy, though in Daniel's case, there was no alcohol involved. Just a habit, just sleep. And here's the thing, he didn't even know it had happened. No pain, no waking up, just deep sleep followed by dysfunction. Daniel said something that stuck with me. I built homes for 50 years. Never once did I think sleeping could tear down mine. It hit me hard, because I used to sleep the same way. Left side, hand under the pillow, shoulder forward. I'd wake up sore, sometimes with a tingle, but I always shrugged it off. Daniel's story changed that. I started digging into the science. Turns out, when you sleep on your side and compress your arm under the weight of your head or torso, you're not just cutting off blood, you're stretching and flattening nerves that aren't built for pressure. The older we get, the less resilient those nerves become. And the longer the compression, the longer the recovery, if recovery even comes. Daniel's strength eventually returned, but not fully. He still drops tools now and then, can't hammer like he used to. But what changed most was how he sleeps. Now, he uses a body pillow to support his frame, keeps his arms forward but not pinned, elevates his head slightly to reduce shoulder pressure, and, most importantly, he moves if he wakes up and feels any numbness. I had to unlearn the one thing I thought I could count on, he told me. That line resonated deeply. Because isn't that what aging often is? Learning to let go of habits we swore by, and choosing what serves us now, not what worked in youth. If you sleep on your side, and most of us do, try paying attention tonight. Notice where your arm is. Feel for tension in your shoulder. Ask yourself, could I keep this position for 6 hours straight without hurting something? And if the answer is no, shift, adapt. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Next, I want to share a story that seems harmless at first. Tossing, turning, getting up for water, or to adjust the blanket. But what if those restless nights are actually your brain's way of sounding the alarm? There was a time when I thought tossing and turning was just part of getting older. A stiff back, an overactive bladder, maybe a bit of indigestion. I chalked it up to life. But then I met Elaine. She was 72, lived just outside of Denver, and volunteered at the local animal shelter 3 mornings a week. Sharp, independent, and still rode her bicycle every Sunday. But when we met at a seniors' wellness seminar, her eyes told a different story. Tired, clouded, distracted. She pulled me aside and whispered, almost embarrassed, "I can't sleep anymore. I fall asleep, but I wake up. Over and over. Sometimes every hour." At first, I offered the usual advice. Cut caffeine. Wind down earlier. But then she added something that made my chest tighten. Some nights, I feel like my heart is racing, like I'm being shaken awake from inside. That was no ordinary insomnia. Turns out, Elaine had been having what her doctor later called micro-awakenings, brief moments of arousal triggered by drops in oxygen to her brain. Not enough to jolt her fully awake, but enough to keep her from entering deep, restorative sleep. In simpler terms, her brain was struggling to breathe. I've come to learn this is more common than we realize, especially in people over 60, where vascular aging narrows the arteries, and minor dips in blood pressure during the night can lead to temporary oxygen shortages. The body is smart. It won't let you suffocate. So it sends signals: racing heart, sudden wake-ups, gasps for breath, restless legs. But because we're asleep or half asleep, we don't remember them. We just wake up tired, foggy, irritable, and assume it's just age. Elaine's sleep study revealed mild sleep apnea, not the loud, gasping kind most people think of, but the silent, oxygen-dipping kind. The kind that damages the brain slowly, night after night. But here's the thing that hit me hardest. These interruptions weren't random. They were warnings. Little SOS signals from the brain saying, "I need more air. I need better flow. Help me." Elaine started using a special wedge pillow to elevate her upper body just slightly. She wore a pulse oximeter ring for a few weeks to track her oxygen levels at night. She even started walking after dinner to improve her circulation. Within a month, she said something I'll never forget. "I don't dream much anymore, but lately I've started dreaming again. And I wake up happy." That stuck with me. Because dreaming isn't just fluff, it's proof that your brain made it into deep sleep, that it had the resources and safety to go offline for a bit. If you find yourself tossing and turning at night, waking frequently, feeling unrested no matter how many hours you clock in bed, it might be more than stress. It might be your brain calling for help. Don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. And please, don't accept exhaustion as the new normal. Simple adjustments can make a world of difference. Elevate your head slightly. Keep your bedroom air fresh and not too dry. Avoid heavy meals late at night. Stay hydrated but not too close to bedtime. And if your heart races or you wake gasping, talk to your doctor. Get checked. You deserve real rest, not just time spent lying down. Tomorrow, I'll share a story about something that happened to me, a mistake I made one night that almost cost me everything. And it all started with a tiny pill bottle I forgot to open. It was a Tuesday night, nothing special. I had just finished watching a documentary about the Appalachian Trail, poured myself a glass of water, and headed to bed. I remember glancing at the little white bottle on my nightstand, my blood pressure meds, and thinking, I'll take it in the morning. That thought, that one small decision, nearly ended everything. I'd been on that medication for over a decade. It wasn't new. It wasn't experimental. Just a steady, reliable companion that kept my numbers where they needed to be. But that night, I was tired. I told myself one missed dose wouldn't hurt. Bedum. I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. I woke up drenched in sweat, head pounding like a drum. My chest felt tight, but not in a crushing way, more like something heavy was sitting on it. I tried to sit up, but my balance was off. My tongue felt thick. I stumbled to the kitchen and nearly fell. When I finally checked my blood pressure, it was sky high. Numbers I hadn't seen since my late 50s. I called my son. He came over and drove me straight to urgent care. The doctor wasn't surprised. He'd seen it before. You skipped your evening dose, he said, flipping through my chart. At your age, with your history, that's enough to trigger a hypertensive surge, especially while you sleep, when the body's less able to compensate. I stared at him, stunned. One pill, one night. He explained it like this. Our bodies are creatures of rhythm. Blood pressure has a circadian pattern. It typically dips at night, allowing our cardiovascular system to rest. But for those of us with hypertension, that dip doesn't always happen naturally. The medication helps create that rest. Without it, the pressure can build silently, steadily, until something breaks. In my case, I was lucky. No stroke, no heart attack, just a wake-up call. But it got me thinking, how many of us have little orange bottles we forget to open? How many of us skip a dose thinking we'll make it up later? And how many never wake up to learn from that mistake? My neighbor Patricia wasn't so lucky. She missed her blood thinner 2 nights in a row. The third morning, she was found on the floor, unable to speak, one side of her body frozen. A clot had formed while she slept. It moved fast, too fast. I don't say this to scare you, but to remind you, that small bottle on your nightstand might just be the most powerful tool you have, not just for living longer, but for waking up tomorrow with your full self intact. Now, I set a reminder on my phone every night. I keep my pills in a weekly organizer. I treat that 2-minute routine like brushing my teeth non-negotiable, because the cost of forgetting isn't just a number on a chart. It's independence. It's memory. It's your ability to hug your grandchildren, make your own breakfast, walk unassisted down the driveway. If you've got medication waiting for you tonight, I encourage you, don't wait. Take it. Honor the routine. Protect your brain while it sleeps. Next time, I want to take you to another common scenario, one that seems innocent enough. A chilly night, a thick blanket, maybe even falling asleep without socks. But what happens to your blood vessels when you sleep cold might surprise you. That winter hit harder than most. The kind of cold that made the floorboards creak and your breath hang in the air like fog. I remember it because that's when I decided to sleep with the window cracked open. Fresh air, I thought. That's what they say is good for you, right? I bundled up tight. Wool socks, thick pajama pants, 3 layers of blankets. But I left my head uncovered, resting on a pillow I'd had for years, flat, lumpy, worn thin at the center. I don't remember falling asleep. But I do remember waking up with a pain at the base of my skull, like something was squeezing the back of my neck. My jaw felt tight. My vision was blurred for a few seconds. When I tried to turn my head, it felt like something inside was grinding. I sat there for minutes, frozen, unsure if I'd had a stroke or just slept wrong. Later that morning, after the stiffness passed, I called my friend Carla. She's a retired nurse from upstate New York and the kind of woman who still reads medical journals just for fun. She asked me 2 questions. How cold was your room? And what kind of pillow do you use? I told her. She sighed. You're compressing your brainstem every night, she said. And on a cold night like that, your blood vessels constrict even more. You're inviting trouble. That conversation opened a rabbit hole for me. Turns out, sleeping in a cold environment isn't just uncomfortable, it can trigger vasoconstriction, especially in older adults. When the temperature drops, blood vessels near the surface narrow to preserve core warmth. But that also means reduced blood flow to the extremities, and in this case, to the neck and brain. Pair that with a low, unsupportive pillow that lets your head tilt backward or sideways, and suddenly your vertebral arteries are stretched or compressed all night. It doesn't take much. In youth, our bodies adapt, but after 60, the margin for error shrinks. Stiff vessels, slower blood flow, thicker blood due to mild dehydration. Add cold and poor posture to the mix, and you're setting the stage for a silent brain event. I started noticing a pattern. Every time I slept with the room cold, or when I used that old pillow, I woke up groggy, with neck pain or headaches. But when I warmed the room slightly and switched to a pillow designed to support the cervical spine, my mornings changed. No more jaw tension, no more dizzy spells. I even stopped needing that second cup of coffee just to feel human. I also began layering thin blankets instead of using one heavy one. This allowed me to regulate my temperature better. I kept a heating pad by the foot of the bed to gently warm my feet, an old trick my grandmother swore by. And the biggest change? I invested in a memory foam pillow with a gentle curve that supported my neck without pushing my head too far forward. That single adjustment made my sleep deeper. I stopped waking up every hour. I started dreaming again. If you're someone who loves a cold room, I get it. There's something crisp, clean, almost invigorating about cool air at night. But don't freeze your brain in the process. Keep the air fresh, yes, but not frigid. And for heaven's sake, treat your neck with respect. Your pillow isn't just a cushion. It's a bridge between your spinal cord and your brain, between safety and risk. Next time, I want to talk about something more indulgent. You ever gone to bed after a big meal and a glass or two of wine? Feels cozy, right? Let's just say. It's not as harmless as it feels. There's something comforting about a hearty dinner. Maybe it's baked lasagna, fresh out of the oven, paired with warm garlic bread and followed by a glass of red wine. On cold evenings, it feels like a small luxury, a reward for making it through another long day. That's exactly what I had that night. It was a Saturday. My daughter and her husband had come over. We laughed, shared stories, and clinked glasses. Just one glass of wine. Just one helping too many. Nothing excessive, nothing wild. By 9 o'clock, they had left. By 10, I was in bed full, warm, a little sleepy from the wine. I thought I'd sleep like a baby. Instead, I woke up feeling like I was drowning. My heart was pounding. My chest was tight. My stomach churned with acid. I couldn't breathe deeply. And for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. It passed after a few minutes, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat upright, propped against pillows, waiting for the fear to fade. In the morning, I called my doctor. After some tests and a very honest conversation, we pieced it together. What I experienced wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't a panic attack either. It was something quieter, but no less dangerous. A combination of gastric reflux, alcohol-induced vasodilation, and elevated nighttime blood pressure, all compounded by lying flat too soon after eating. Here's how it works. When you eat a heavy meal, especially one rich in fat and carbohydrates, your body redirects blood flow to your digestive system. Add alcohol into the mix, and your blood vessels relax even more. That may feel cozy, but it slows everything down: circulation, digestion, and even brain perfusion. Then, when you lie down on a full stomach acid can creep up into the esophagus. This can stimulate the vagus nerve, which regulates heart rate and blood pressure. In some cases, it triggers erratic rhythms or sudden blood pressure spikes, particularly in older adults. For me, That glass of wine had lowered my baseline pressure just enough to confuse my body. Then the rebound effect kicked in my heart, trying to compensate, my brain fighting to stabilize, all while I lay there, unaware. It sounds dramatic, but I've since learned that many strokes and heart events happen in the hours after a large dinner, especially when paired with alcohol, and followed by immediate rest. I changed my routine that week. I still enjoy good food. I still sip wine on special occasions. But I finish eating at least 3 hours before bed now. I take gentle walks after dinner, even if it's just around the house. I sleep slightly elevated. And I keep a bottle of water beside the bed, not wine. That simple adjustment has made my nights more restful. No more waking up gasping. No more heart palpitations. No more fear. If you're someone who enjoys a big dinner and a little indulgence, I get it. That ritual is part of the joy of life. But don't let that joy turn into risk. Eat earlier. Move gently afterward. Let your body process before you rest. Give your heart and brain the space to recover, not react. Because the comfort we seek in food and drink should end in laughter around the table, not confusion in the dark. In the next part, I'll share a lesson that came from the quietest place in the house, my bathroom. What happened in there one night could have ended very differently. And it all began with light. Or rather, the lack of it. I used to pride myself on knowing every inch of my house in the dark. After all, I'd lived there for nearly 30 years. I could walk from the bedroom to the bathroom with my eyes closed. Literally. That's exactly what I did one night. It was around 2 in the morning. I woke up with a full bladder, like most men my age do. I didn't want to wake my wife with the bright bathroom light, so I shuffled quietly across the carpet, around the foot of the bed, through the hallway, and that's where everything went wrong. There was a slipper, just one, somehow kicked a little off to the side earlier that evening. My foot caught it. I didn't fall hard, but I fell awkward. My knee twisted under me, and I slammed my elbow against the doorframe. The pain was sharp, immediate. I lay there stunned, confused, more embarrassed than anything, but it wasn't until the next morning, when I couldn't straighten my arm, that the reality hit. I'd fractured a small bone near the elbow. It would take 6 weeks to heal, followed by months of stiffness, all because I didn't turn on the light. When I told my doctor, she shook her head and said, "You're lucky, you know. Most night falls in your age group end in hip fractures, or worse." I started digging. Turns out, over 50% of household falls among older adults happen at night, most of them during bathroom trips. Poor lighting, groggy balance, unstable footing, and often, low blood pressure from sleep or medications makes those first few steps even riskier. The irony? We avoid the light to stay asleep, but that darkness may rob us of far more than rest. After that fall, I made a few simple changes. I installed motion sensor nightlights, soft, warm, and just enough to guide me without shocking my eyes. I cleared the floor of loose rugs and slippers. I put a small rubber mat near the toilet for grip. And most importantly, I started sitting down to urinate at night. Yes, even as a proud old man. Because no dignity is worth a broken hip. My friend Walter, who lives up in Oregon, wasn't as lucky. He slipped in his tiled bathroom and shattered his hip. 1 surgery, a 3-month recovery, and a permanent change in the way he walks. And what caused it? He told me sheepishly, "Didn't want to wake my wife with the bathroom light." I get it. We were taught to be quiet, considerate, tough it out. But when it comes to nighttime safety, we've got to let that go. Because falling at our age isn't like falling at 25. Our bones don't bounce, they break. Now, every time I walk to the bathroom in the dark, I think about that slipper, that single object, that small decision, and how close I came to turning a quiet night into a medical emergency. If you're still walking through the house in the dark, thinking you've got it memorized, please reconsider. Add a nightlight. Keep your path clear. Sit down when needed, because one step in darkness can undo decades of independence. And in the next part, I'll take you to the heart literally. What happens to your heartbeat while you sleep may be the most telling sign of all, and most of us never even check it. After the fall, I started paying attention to things I used to ignore. Not just my footing, but my heartbeat. It began one night as I lay in bed, trying to get comfortable. I pressed my hand gently to my chest, like I'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, I really listened. Thump, 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 then a pause, then a flutter, then a faster rhythm, like my heart was trying to catch up with itself. It didn't hurt. I wasn't dizzy, but something felt off. The next morning, I strapped on an old fitness tracker my grandson gave me last Christmas. I never used it much, didn't think it was made for people like me, but that night, I wore it while I slept. The data shocked me. My resting heart rate was erratic. It dipped too low at times into the 40s, then spiked without warning. Worse, there were moments where the rhythm stopped for a second. Not minutes, but enough for the device to flag it as an irregular heartbeat. I called my doctor. After a Holter monitor and a week of tracking, the diagnosis came back. Paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. A fancy name for a heartbeat that gets confused sometimes, especially during sleep. I asked what could have triggered it. Her answer was sobering. Age. Yes. But also poor sleep posture, overeating late, alcohol, cold temperatures, stress, even neck compression, all the things you've told me you've been through this year. She told me that many older adults experience arrhythmias only during sleep. And because we're unconscious, we miss the symptoms. No chest pain, no panic, just fatigue, confusion, maybe a fall the next day. In some cases, these rhythms can lead to blood pooling in the atria. That blood can clot, that clot can travel, and in the blink of an eye, it can cause a stroke. I was stunned. I always thought strokes were sudden, dramatic, but she explained that many begin silently in the night when the heart forgets how to keep time, and the brain pays the price. So, I made changes. I started wearing that tracker every night. I elevated my upper body slightly with pillows. I stopped eating past 7. I avoided alcohol before bed. And I kept my bedroom warm, but not stuffy. Most importantly, I stopped ignoring my heartbeat. I began each morning by reviewing my sleep data, not obsessively but with respect. Because that rhythm is more than just a pulse, it's a message. It's a warning system. It's the soundtrack of our survival. I also joined a local support group for folks with atrial fibrillation. We meet every month at the library. And what struck me most wasn't how many of us there were, but how many discovered their condition because of a scare, a fall, a dizzy spell, a forgotten moment during sleep that left lasting consequences. You don't have to wait for that. If you've ever felt your heart race or skip a beat at night, if you wake up groggy despite sleeping 8 hours, if you feel off, but can't explain why it's worth checking, not to live in fear, but to live informed, because your heartbeat tells the truth, even when your mind is asleep. And in the next part, I'll share something more personal, how my own breathing, or lack of it, nearly cost me a morning I never would have seen coming. It's strange, the things you remember. That night, I remember the dream. I was underwater, deep, heavy, dark. I kept swimming upward, lungs burning, but I couldn't break the surface. No matter how hard I kicked, the light kept slipping further away. Then, suddenly, I gasped. Air filled my chest like fire. I shot up in bed, drenched in sweat, heart slamming against my ribs. My wife turned toward me, eyes wide. "You stopped breathing," she said. It was almost a full minute. I didn't believe her at first. Thought maybe I was snoring too loud. But then it happened again. 2 nights later, then again. And each time, I felt it more waking up with a throat full of air, heart racing, head pounding. We went to the sleep clinic. I was hooked up to wires, monitored overnight. The results were unsettling. I had sleep apnea. Not the kind with loud snoring and obvious gasping, but the quiet, insidious kind where your throat closes just enough to starve the brain of oxygen in short, repeated bursts. They counted over 30 episodes in a single night. 30. Each one, a moment when my brain fought to survive without me knowing. Each one stealing seconds of oxygen, chipping away at my memory, my energy, my resilience. I asked the doctor, "Why now? Why me?" She said, "Because you've aged. Your muscles are softer. Your airway narrows when you lie flat. Your brain isn't as quick to wake you when something's wrong." In other words, the same sleep that once restored me was now a battlefield. I was prescribed a CPAP machine, a small device that pushes air gently into the lungs through a soft mask. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to sleep hooked up to a machine. It felt like admitting defeat. But after the first night, I changed my mind. I woke up clear-headed. I remembered my dreams. My wife said I hadn't made a sound. Not a gasp, not a twitch. I'd slept. For real. I've used that machine ever since. Every night. No shame, no complaint. Because I've learned this. Breath is not a given. Not anymore. And the brain, our memory, our balance, our very sense of self, depends on oxygen like a candle depends on air. Since starting treatment, I've felt younger. Not in body, maybe, but in spirit. I walk farther. I think clearer. I laugh more. And I share this now because I know too many of us are living in denial. We chalk up fatigue to age, memory loss to stress, headaches to poor sleep. But sometimes, the cause is simpler, scarier, and fixable. So if someone tells you that you stop breathing at night, if you wake up choking, if you always feel tired no matter how long you sleep, please, don't ignore it. Test, ask, investigate. Because the scariest thing isn't knowing, it's not knowing. It's the seconds you're losing while the world sleeps on. In the next part, I'll tell you about the final piece of the puzzle, something so simple. I never thought it could change my life, but it did. And it started with a glass of water. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what could save a man's life in his sleep, I never would have said water. I mean, we all know hydration is important. We've heard it our whole lives. Drink 8 glasses a day. Carry a bottle. But no one ever told me that one simple glass of water before bed could be the difference between waking up and not. It started after my sleep apnea diagnosis. My doctor gave me a pamphlet, one of those thick, dry ones that you usually toss into a drawer. But one sentence caught my eye. Dehydration during sleep increases blood viscosity, raising the risk of clotting and stroke, especially in older adults. It hit me hard. I'd always avoided drinking anything at night. Like most men my age, I didn't want to make midnight trips to the bathroom. I thought I was being smart, efficient, preventing interruptions. What I was really doing was thickening my blood every night, creating the perfect conditions for clot formation while my body was still and my heart was slowing down. That realization kept me up more than once. So I started a new habit. Just 4 ounces of water before bed. Not a full glass. Not enough to flood my bladder. Just enough to keep things moving to thin the blood, hydrate the vessels, support my brain. The results weren't dramatic at first, but they were real. My morning headaches eased. My blood pressure stabilized. I stopped waking up with dry mouth and fatigue. And more than anything, I felt like I was giving my body a fighting chance while I slept. It wasn't just the water. It was the message behind it. That we don't stop taking care of ourselves just because the lights go out. That our bodies are still working, repairing, healing. That they need tools, even in darkness. I shared this with my neighbor Jim, a retired math teacher who used to joke that water was only good for fish. A few weeks later, he pulled me aside. "You know," he said, "I started doing what you said. That little bit of water? My legs don't cramp anymore. I sleep better. I even remember my dreams again." That made me smile. Because we think health is complicated, and sometimes it is. But sometimes, it's just about showing up for yourself in small ways. A soft pillow, a little movement, a quiet machine that helps you breathe, or a single glass of water on your nightstand, waiting for you like a promise. Now, every night, I set 2 things before bed: my CPAP mask and my water glass. I call it my survival kit. And in the final part of this journey, I want to wrap it all together. To share the truth I've found not just in studies or statistics, but in my own story. The lesson of listening, of adjusting, of choosing to stay alive with intention, one night at a time. Looking back, I used to think sleep was just a pause button. Something passive. You lay down, close your eyes, and hope to wake up refreshed. But that was before the stroke scare, before the fall in the dark, before the skipped pill, the missed heartbeat, the quiet gasp for air. Now I know better. Sleep isn't rest. It's repair. It's risk. It's where your body does its deepest work, or where it quietly starts to break down if you let it. And the truth is, for people like us, those in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, sleep becomes less forgiving. The small things we used to shrug off, they don't shrug back anymore. But here's the good news. Every story I've shared, the man who slept in his recliner, the friend who stopped breathing in his sleep, the fall that nearly stole my independence, they all came with lessons. And those lessons built something stronger than fear. They built awareness. And awareness, my friend, is the foundation of change. We can no longer sleep like we're 20. But we can sleep smarter. We can sleep safer. We can sleep with purpose. That means drinking that small glass of water to keep your blood flowing, using a pillow that supports your neck and keeps your arteries open, wearing the oxygen mask if your body forgets how to breathe, clearing the floor, turning on the light, and never letting pride outweigh safety. It means seeing sleep not as a break but as a mission, a sacred time when your brain needs protection, your heart needs rhythm, and your lungs need space. I once heard someone say, "Old age is a privilege denied to many." I believe that now more than ever. So, if you're lucky enough to see the sun rise tomorrow, let it be because you honored the night before, because you prepared, you adjusted, you didn't ignore the whispers of your body. I'll be honest, every night, I still check. The water, the mask, the lights, the medications. It's a ritual now. Not a burden, but a blessing. Because each morning I wake up with clarity, with memory, with strength. I get another day with my grandchildren. Another walk. Another story. And maybe this, right here, is the most important one I'll tell. So if you've stayed with me through all 15 parts, thank you. Not just for listening, but for caring about your own life enough to understand it better. Don't fear the night. Just learn how to meet it with wisdom. Because when you sleep right, you don't just wake up, you rise.